Hey guys, welcome to today's video where I'm going to be building and painting the Terminator Captain from the Combat Pratol issue 1. I decided to, instead of going with the art that's on the box or adding him to my Blood Angels army, I'm going to paint the Space Marines from Combat Pratol as Dark Angels. And of course, since this is a Terminator, he's going to be a Deathwing Terminator in the kind of bone white color scheme. But first things first, we're going to head and attach the base to my little holder. This base is a little too big for the pieces to actually stretch out, so I went ahead and just got some sticky tack and used that to hold it down, and we're going to get to clipping the parts. You can see here that the base has a head of Tyranid. I think it's a Screamer Killer. As far as painting the Tyranids from the Combat Pratol, I think I'm going to go with a Xenomorph kind of inspired paint scheme. I'm not going to do nothing too crazy because I know there's going to be a good bit of them. Plus I already actually have a couple little Hormigons and Termagants that a friend gave me a while back that I'm going to add to these eventually. And I figured just a nice simple black with a gray dry brush on the flesh bits and then gloss on the armor will be pretty good. So I went ahead and got all the parts here clipped off and organized, and I'm just going to go ahead and clean everything up. I am going to do this into a couple little sub-assemblies. It's going to be the base. I'm going to have the back cape piece as its own so I can get the inside of the cape, and then I'm going to put the main body together with the leg pieces and then the shoulders on the arms and attach the bolt gun pieces together. Also, you can see that this is one of the easy to build models. I know the Space Marines and the Tyranids. I'm gonna say Tyranids a lot because I've been playing a lot of Helldivers, but the Space Marines and the Tyranids are the easy to build models from the starter box. They have these little pegs on them, and if you ever build any of the Warhammer easy to build kits, a lot of times the pegs are a little too long. You can't press them all the way together. So I usually just clip them most of the way off and just glue it together like you normally would with a regular thing. And here we are with the little sub-assemblies. So we got the power sword arm with the shoulder armor on. Get that into focus so you can see detail. And these do have a lot of detail, but I'm trying to keep the paint scheme on all these guys kind of simple so that way I could keep up with painting them as new issues and boxes come in, because some of these are going to have squads of guys and it's going to be a lot to try to keep up with every month. There was the bolt gun with its shoulder piece. Real simple. And here we got the main body, which like I said, I'm keeping it separate from the back armor and cape piece, so that way I can get to the back side of the legs and stuff here, as well as get to the inside of the cape. I was kind of hoping that this model was going to come with the Terminator helmet, but it didn't. So I'm going to paint the flesh. That's the first time painting skin. And here you can see the base. I went ahead and primed that black. And as you'll see in a little bit, all the other pieces are painted or primed white. And that's just because it's going to be a white armor with the Tyranid being black. I went and just primed the base black. And I'm adding some matte black to go ahead and touch up some stuff on it, and as well as a darker gray that I have from Vallejo that I'll be kind of mixing those together to kind of build up a transition on the flesh bits for dry brushing it, and then use just the black on the armor kind of carapace pieces. So the first thing I'm going to do is go and get that black coated all over the Terminid. There we go, getting a second Terminid Tyranid. Just to make sure it's got a nice even coat. And then I'm going to come in with that gray and just go ahead and get all the rocks covered. I kind of eventually end up mixing a couple different grays and some different whites in to kind of get a not uniform color on the rocks. And I do end up covering some of it with some Sterling Battlemire technical paint, but that's all going to be towards the end. I kind of go back and forth between the base and the actual model itself, as you know, I'm letting parts dry and all that, and some parts need extra coats. Like this gray doesn't actually cover that great, especially when I try to put a lighter color on top of it before it was fully dry. So I kind of did some painting between recording and kind of cut out a lot of the random stuff here and there while I was just letting stuff dry. And here, so I had to go ahead with another coat of gray, a little bit lighter gray. Just kind of put a little mix of colors in so it's not just one uniform flat color. And then I'll go ahead and get some art coat. This is the Citadel's gloss finish. And I'm going to end up doing like 2 or 3 coats of this all over the carapace armor. And I think I might have cut some of it out, but I did mix the black and gray to do a dry brush over the flesh bits. You'll get some better shots of it in a couple angles, but yeah, it's just me kind of really experimenting with how I'm going to paint these. When I actually go to paint the Tyranid Prime and the Von Rein's Leapers, I'll have a better kind of grasp and show that in a little more detail. Now, here we go, starting with the body, and going to start with the cape here. And I'm going to use Dark Angels green contrast paints. My first time really using contrast paints on a large flat area. I've used them for like little things like the yellow helmets on some of my assault marines that are Blood Angels, because they have a yellow helmet and it came out pretty nice. But it's my first time doing it on a large flat area for the most part. And it is going to take a couple coats. It's going to come out a little splotchy, and later on in the video I'll kind of show how I kind of fix that and make it come out a lot nicer. And you can see here that this first coat is coming out pretty bright green and kind of splotchy and streaky. I ended up doing 2 coats, and it ends up coming out a lot darker than I originally wanted, and still there's some like really light bright spots that I wasn't a fan of. So later on, after it all dries, I do correct it by using another like regular non-contrast green to kind of sort of dry brush, kind of cover most of it, and then do another coat of this later on. But we'll get more into that when we get to that part of the video. Now I'm moving on to the armor, and I'm using some Seraphim Sepia shade. Anyone who's painted Deathwing knows that this is pretty much the way to go. And I'm just kind of going through covering all the armor bits, leaving all the other stuff. I am going to come back and touch up everything else with white before going on to painting its actual colors. But I just want to go ahead and get this initial coat, and I ended up doing like 2 or 3 coats of this. I do 2, and then I do a dry brush of the wraith bone you see sitting there, and then I come back and do a third coat, a light coat, to kind of bring it all together. If at any point you're looking at the sword arm and see that it looks a little damaged, or it's got not the smoothest coat of paint, that's because when I primed it, I accidentally went way too heavy with the white primer, and then in an attempt to kind of clean it off to reprime it, I used a chemical that was a little too hot, a little too aggressive, and it ended up kind of damaging the part a little bit, but I got it as cleaned up as I could. Now that I got all that Seraphim Sepia on, I'm going to kind of go in with some white here, and right first here, touch up around the cape. You see, like I was saying earlier, it came out kind of splotchy. This is before the second coat. This is just the first coat. But I did want to go ahead and clean up the white, because pretty soon I'm going to do the Seraphim Sepia over the armor panels on that. And at first, when I was doing the second coat, it was coming up pretty even. There's a couple light spots, but as you kind of see towards when I finish painting it, especially when it dries, it's really dark, almost black in some spots, and then there's a couple little splotches here and there you kind of see in the middle there that's just almost white, and I wasn't too happy with that, but I kind of learned my lesson with this, and know for on the later models in this set that are going to have the green capes how to kind of fix that. And here's just a little close-up of after the first coat of the Seraphim Sepia. It was a lot lighter than I wanted, so that's why I went ahead and did multiple coats. It's kind of just inspecting the parts, taking a look at everything. This is when I kind of went ahead and like decided to go ahead and do the back part with the Seraphim Sepia, just kind of get it caught up with everything else. And here we go, we're finally getting that second coat of the Seraphim Sepia on. At this stage, I'm letting myself be messy, just kind of making sure I get everything covered. I had noticed at some point that I missed a spot or two, and so I was just kind of going over everything, making sure I got everything covered, and that there's a good little buildup in some of the recesses, and just kind of trying to make it somewhat even. That's okay if it's a little splotchy, because like I said, I do eventually do a little dry brush and then another coat after that to kind of even it all out, kind of mellow it out. But I'm real happy with how this comes out. I really like. I wish I had already had Seraphim Sepia. I could have been using it. Here you can kind of see, yeah, I got everything with its second coat, and I'm coming in with, you can't read it there, but it's Wraithbone. It's the first time using this Wraithbone. It's a weird off-white. I don't know, it's all right. I do the dry brush, and I kind of realized that I did a little heavier than I would have liked, but I do like that some of the edges got lighter and a little cleaned up, and some of the flat areas were a little evened out. But that's why I went ahead and did a kind of touch-up third coat with the Seraphim Sepia after this. At first, I thought the dry brushing looked good, but then it was kind of, especially with that back piece, I kind of realized I did it a little too heavy, uh, and that's why I kind of went back later and touched it all up. And here I'm just kind of doing something I kind of recommend everyone doing with your painting and sub assemblies. Just every once in a while, put it together, see how everything's kind of coming together, how it's going to look when it's all done, help you get a better idea of what does need to be, have more time spent on the details, what kind of doesn't, because you're not going to see it. And it's just kind of me just looking at it, seeing how everything goes together in its final assembly. Now this is when I decided to go ahead and fix the cape. I'm using some US dark green from Vallejo, and then I'm going to grab that moot green from Citadel and kind of mix them together. The thing is, I didn't want the cape to come out too dark, so I didn't want to use just the darker US green, and then I didn't want it to be too bright, so that's why I didn't use just that. I kind of put a little bit of each on the palette and kind of mix them together. I don't know why I used my big dry brush for this, but I guess it was right there, and I was just gonna maybe try and dry brush it on, but then ended up kind of doing a little more even coat, leaving some dark areas, just so it's, because the whole point of the contrast paints is that you get the dark and light, but it was a little too dark and too bright. It's kind of the problem, so they're kind of got them mixed together, and I'm gonna kind of go with the nice light coat, kind of covering the majority of the cape to kind of bring it all even. And now that I got that done and it's kind of dried, it's time to go ahead and do a nice, thin, kind of even layer of the Dark Angels contrast green. And I could already tell when as I was painting it that this looked so much better than it originally did. And it looks even better once it finally dries and everything kind of evens out. And while I let that dry, I'm going ahead and touching up with a thin kind of little layer of some more Seraphim sepia just to kind of fix the spots that I went a little heavy with the dry brush and really make that color pop, because I really did like how it looked with the Seraphim sepia when it's a little darker. Though I do like having some lighter spots and some like kind of highlights from the dry brush of the Wraithbone. So I didn't go too heavy with it, just kind of filling it in some spots and bringing it back to that kind of more beige, light tan color than as opposed to like a slight off-white. And now I kind of decided to go back while that was drying to work a little more on the base. So here I'm using to mix some of that wraith bone into different light grays and white that I have. Like I said, trying to not let it have a uniform color, but make sure everything gets nice and coated, a nice, somewhat even layer of different colors. It's kind of hard to see on camera, but in person you can kind of see slight variations in some different spots. Now I'm getting some shining silver to do the teeth on the Tyranid. I'm also going to use this for a lot of the metallic parts on the actual Space Marine. But I thought it'd be a good way to kind of pop with a something different than just like gray or something for the teeth or white. Get some nice, make them look real sharp with the metallic color. I'm also going to grab some Screamer Pink for the tongue. It's pretty much the only spot that I use it. Usually I use Screamer Pink for the wax seals on Purity seals, but to keep this guy a little different from my usual Space Marines, I'm just going to use red on those. But here's a close-up of what I got. I'm pretty happy with how it came out. It is going to be, the process is going to be a little more refined when I go to actually paint some Tyranids, but as a good first test of the paint scheme, I'm pretty happy with how it came out. Now I'm going to go ahead and touch up the white on details that mostly just the purity seals themselves, and a couple other details that I'm going to paint different colors, particularly like the housing of the bolt gun and a couple other things, just to make doing the final coat a little easier. Usually when I do purity seals on my Blood Angel Space Marines, I end up painting them a color similar to the armor of this Deathwing Terminator. But to make them stand out more, I decided just to go ahead and paint them white, and then at the end I'll use some non-oil on them to kind of make them not so flat looking. Now that I got a lot of the base kind of colors done, with the exception of some like finer details, so I'm gonna go ahead and glue the back part of the body to the main body. and I'm just going to use a toothpick to kind of help spread the glue out. It's kind of hard to tell which spots actually make contact, so just to make sure I can get them all covered as best as I can, just spread it out a little bit with the toothpick, and go ahead and put that together with the rest of the main body. Now moving on to the bolt gun, left arm. A lot of Blood Angels, the housing on their weapons tends to be red in color, whereas usually most other Space Marines it's black, which is what I usually do on Blood Angels. But I decided to go ahead and use, since it's primed white, I might as well go ahead and try out this other contrast paint that I have, Blood Angels red, which I'm also going to use that on the wax seals. Usually, like I said earlier, I do the Screamer pink, but they kind of help keep these guys pretty distinct looking, even in the details from my other Space Marines. Just doing little things like making the purity seals themselves white, making the wax part red instead of a pinkish purple, little things like that. Kind of help distinguish them. On top of the wax seals being painted the same color, I'm going to paint the handle part of the power sword, Blood Angels red. I am going to do a red power sword color. It's my first time really trying to actually do like a kind of proper power sword paint scheme. Usually I just kind of do a metallic and then do like a thin coat of like blue or something, just to kind of make it like an uneven bluish metallic color. But later on you'll see I actually try to do like the kind of checkered pattern of power weapons, but in red as opposed to blue. And there's that shining silver that I used on the teeth on the Tyranid that now I'm going to use for the rest of the bolts gun, as well as his shoulder crest and knee crest. I'm also going to use it on the emblem that's above his back, just as a first coat. I am going to paint that gold as well as a couple other spots, but sometimes gold don't cover that great, so I like to hit it either with like some kind of silver that's going to cover better first. I'm also going to be painting the hoses on his elbows here, as you can see. Nice little close-up of that. And like I said, I'm painting the crest above his head in a base coat of the silver, just to help with the coverage of the gold. So that way, whatever doesn't get covered will still have metallic underneath. I ended up doing like 3 coats of gold at least, just to make sure I get a nice uniform. Try to get a uniform coverage. Like I said, some golds are better than others, but they all seem to kind of not always cover the greatest. Take a lot of coats, but that's just something I do to try and help, since silver usually coats a little better. And speaking of gold, here we have the Vallejo Old Gold. Again, this is something I'm doing to kind of distinguish him from my other Space Marines. Usually on the Blood Angels, I use Greedy Gold from Army Painter, but I had this other gold, which is a lot more, not as bright, kind of more, just like I said, it's old gold, a more a little faded, I guess. Again, just to put a distinction between them, so that way they look kind of cohesive, but not like like maybe these guys could be part of the same army. But yeah, just another little detail thing I try to mix up. Other parts that I'm painting gold are going to be the skulls on his hip armor, as well as the one on his, I guess, his belt buckle or in the center of his waist. I'm also going to do the skulls on his back of his hands, but not his elbows, just because they're just so close to each other. It'd be kind of, I don't know. I thought it would be a little redundant if every single skull on him was gold, but yeah, just did the, like I said, the ones on his hips and the ones on the back of his hands and this kind of belt buckle one, just as to give a little pop of color throughout. I'm also going to do the hilt on I guess the guard on the sword, as well as the pommel, little skull pommel. Uh, Again, it's just putting more pops of color in different places, but make it like a more ornate kind of sword, I guess. Now I'm just kind of going through, touching up, adding other coats of gold where needed. Like I said, gold doesn't always cover that great, so sometimes you have to do multiple coats. I usually try to not thin it as much either. And now I'm finally getting to the knee crest, as well as the shoulder crest that are going to be in that bright silver that I used earlier on the bolt gun. And here's the mostly finished bolt gun arm. Like I said, still I'm going to do a wash of Nuln oil over the silver parts and the purity seal, as well as doing a couple of spots here and there just to break up some of the browns. And I'm going to do the same thing with the gold and silver and purity seal on the sword arm, but I still need to do the actual power sword itself. And I'll be doing that, of course, again on the main body, but just wanted to kind of give you all a little progress shot. You can see how it's coming along so far. And this is my first time really trying like the checkered pattern of a power sword. Decided to go ahead and clean up around the edges and get a nice smooth coat of white on there first to make it all uniform and kind of clean up some of the messiness of the gold right there in the bottom part of the blade. Originally I was starting with a combination of Mephiston red, Troll Slayer orange, as well as Flash gets yellow. The yellow ended up being a little too much, and I probably could have just been just fine with just the orange and red, which I did eventually kind of cover up the part that I did yellow. And of course, before I get to the blade, I'll go ahead and touch up a couple of other spots real quick while I let that white dry after putting like a nice smooth coat on it. Now it's time to actually get to the blade. So the first thing I'm going to do is start off with a full coat of Mephiston red, just as kind of the base layers, the starting color. So I'm going to go ahead and paint both sides of that up real quick. And while that dries, I'm going to go ahead and put a little extra of the Mephiston red on the palette, as well as some of the Troll Slayer orange and Flash gets yellow, so I can kind of make up some blends, kind of transition sort of colors for doing this. Like I said, I probably could have done without the yellow. I think for the red to the orange would have been just a perfectly fine kind of mix. But hey, you gotta try it before you know, right? Now that I got a nice base coat of Mephiston red, I do touch up the gold after I finish the rest of the sword. I'm going to go ahead and mix together, well, first kind of just make sure it's nice and uniform all the way through. But then I'm going to, on my palette, mix together a Mephiston red and a little bit of the Troll Slayer orange. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that slightly brighter red and go on one edge from the base of the sword about 3/4 of the way up, and I'm going to, on the other side of that center line, start about 1/4 of the way up and go all the way to the top. And I'm going to do that exact same thing on the other side, and that's going to kind of be how I do the transition. Is I'm just going to mix a little more orange, then go halfway, then I'd mix the yellow and do just the bottom quarter, but then I kind of go over it with a glaze, with like a thin down red and orange, kind of just to unify it and blend it all together a little better. And you can see now it's really starting to pop with that kind of checkered pattern where the top half has, on one side has the brighter orange. Now I'm almost to the true just Troll Slayer orange, as opposed to, red. And yeah, here's a nice little close-up shot. You can kind of see it kind of transitions in that other quarter kind of. But like I said, it ends up becoming too different. It is not blended enough. Like I said, here I am putting that yellow on mixed with some of the orange, and it ended up just being way too, in my opinion, too much. So I ended up, after doing that, taking some of the kind of reddish, more mid-tone orange and adding a little extra water and just kind of brushing it all over the whole thing to kind of unify the color. And then I do go back and touch up the darker spots with just the pure Mephiston red, but it kind of unifies it all together, and I think ended up looking really nice. And here we go, my first kind of real attempt at like a checkered pattern power sword. I'm pretty happy with it. I don't see the red ones too often, but hey, I think it works great with the kind of bone color with the seraphim and all that. It's nice pop of color, and otherwise kind of uniformly done. Yeah, and I did forget to do the chest crest earlier, so I went ahead and painted that white, and then I'm going over it with the Dark Angels contrast paint. I just kind of just did like a quick, little coat or two just to make it kind of even. I didn't bother doing the green like I did earlier. I figured for just a small kind of thing, it'd come out pretty nice, and it did. So now it's time to kind of get everything glued together and finish the base, and then do any final kind of touching up and detail work. So I'm just going to go ahead and glue on both arms, get while that's drying, work on the face too. I also need to all I've done is base coat it like the armor, so that the pieces of armor you can see are done. And you can see in that jump there that the face is painted and glued in, and it's my first time really trying human skin. I haven't really painted any skin before. All my Space Marines that I have done are all helmeted, and I wasn't really happy with how it came out. So this is me kind of sitting there thinking, like, what can I do to kind of fix it? And then it kind of hit me that the paint I used, which was a Corpse Pale from Army Painter, it's for corpses. It's kind of needs a little something. So I grabbed some of that Screamer Pink and kind of mixed it on the palette here, and just needed a little bit in there to add a little more kind of this light pink kind of flush tone. And I went ahead and just repainted his face, and then retouched up the hair and the service studs on his forehead, and as well as very carefully tried to do his eyes. I didn't put pupils in the eyes. I just painted the eyes white, and I didn't even bother doing his teeth that you could barely see. I figured it for how small it is. To me, it wasn't really worth doing all the detail. And then to kind of make it a little less flat, when I do the Nun Oil on a lot of the other stuff, I forget if I use Nun Oil or Agrax or Shade on it. But just something just to add a little grime and more detail to it to kind of help fix my first attempt at really doing an exposed Space Marine head. But like I said, if it would have came with a Terminator helmet, I would have just used that instead. But hey, you gotta learn how to paint it at some point, right? And now it's time to go ahead and finish up the base. I didn't want to do these kind of like a lot of things the same as I do my usual Space Marines, where I do like some grass flocking and a couple rocks and stuff there. So I went ahead and grabbed some Sterling Battle Mire and kind of covered up a lot of the parts of the base that were just the base, not the actual like piece that came with the model. As well as there's this one section that I couldn't really tell what the details were, so I went ahead and covered most of that up, and just kind of just decided to do just a rocky, muddy base, no grass, nothing like that, and kind of just tuck it in all around the sides. And of course, once I get it all on there, kind of make sure it's I've used the paper towel to kind of wipe the edges to get any excess off, so the rim of the base is smooth. And then when I just grabbed a little more black on the palette just to kind of put that straight on there and clean up the rim real nice. And then before doing the final kind of nun oil kind of washes and touch-ups in a couple spots, I'm going to go ahead and glue this guy on the base, and then we'll be almost done. I did accidentally put a little too much super glue, so I just grabbed a little Q-tip I had and cleaned off some of the excess, and then went ahead and got him on there. Made sure he was on, make sure he had enough to be on there, but I didn't want to have to try and touch up the paint jobs around his feet just because of some frosting from a little too much super glue. And here we go with the nun oil. It's not a Warhammer model unless it's got some nun oil on it. Yeah, you just gotta, like I said earlier, touch up. We'll put it on all the silver parts to kind of add a little grime to them. Kind of use it to weather the white purity seal banners, as well as kind of add a little extra kind of dirt and grime and color to his face. Because it even though the flesh tone is a lot better now, it is still a little flat, and the eyes do kind of pop a lot with that white. So this kind of puts a little darkness around it and kind of mellows it out some, so it's not as apparent that he doesn't have pupils. And if you enjoyed the video so far, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and liking and subscribing. I do have more videos like this coming up. I have the Tyranids that came with the Combat Pratol box one that I'm going to be painting up soon. Hopefully I'll have that for next week. And also have some more Gundam models on the way to do later down the line, as well as each month when I get the new Combat Pratol box, I'll be unboxing that and all that. So thank you. And of course, before this guy is fully done, I do want to put a couple decals on him. I just so happen to have this large transfer sheet of Dark Angels decals, because when I was first buying Space Marines for my army, I did buy the Dark Angels Combat Pratol because it came with the Redemptor Dreadnought, and I really wanted that in my army. So I had a bunch of Dark Angels upgrade bits that I never used, but I held on to them, and I'm glad I did, because this right here is a Deathwing little emblem that I'm going to put on his shoulder, and also have some honor markings I'm going to put on those shields instead of trying to freehand something. I figured it'd be better just, since I got these decals, might as well go ahead and use them. So I'm going to go ahead and get this Deathwing little emblem on his shoulder, and then we'll get some solve set and then get on to the battle markings. And how I like to do the decals is once I get it on there, I'll use a Q-tip, dry it off, and then I'll go ahead and go with some Solvaset or some other similar product and kind of just brush it on. And then while that's drying, go ahead and move on to the other decals. And then I'll end up doing like, I think I do like at least 2 coats of the Solvaset just to make sure that that decal's really kind of melted on and set in place. Luckily this sheet has some of these like really small like honor marks that I could do. It has like 5 of 2 different ones, so I could do one on matching ones on either side, which is good that it comes with 5, because as you'll see in a moment when I go to do his right shoulder, I end up losing it twice and have to grab one of the other ones off the sheet. And while I get these little decals set in place, I want to take a moment to kind of talk about something cool that I'm going to do with these Combat Pratol miniatures that I'm getting. I have this hand-me-down kind of family heirloom shelf that I used to keep a bunch of Dungeons and Dragons and Heroescape miniatures on, but ever since I moved a couple times, it's kind of just been sitting off to the side. But I finally got it hung up on the wall, and I'm going to be putting, as I finish these miniatures, I'm going to be putting them all on that one shelf, so hopefully by the end it's fully packed out with all the different Combat Patrols. I'm hoping they could fit. It's going to be a pretty tight fit, especially with some of the larger things, but I made sure at the end when I'm kind of showing the close-ups of the finished model to kind of show you all the shelf and see and compare this to, so that he's not there by himself, kind of show this with some of my Blood Angels. And as you can see there, I just dropped the decal the first time, and then as I'm getting it set, I go to line it up in place, my fan blows it off right about there, and it made it onto my t-shirt, so I went to go try and get it with the knife, then it fell on the carpet and I lost it. So I went ahead and just, since there was extras, went ahead and just grabbed another one, got it ready, and made sure to carefully get it set in place this time without losing it. But like I said, at the end of the video, I do show in the close-ups that shelf along with, so he's not by himself. I'll put a couple of my Blood Angels up there, but from month to month, as I get more of the Combat Patrol minis and get them painted, that they're all going to be joining them on there. Hopefully next week I'll have finished the Tyranids and they'll be up there with them. And with that final decal, I think he's done. I had a lot of joy painting this guy, like trying some new color schemes. Got to test out the color scheme for the Tyranids. Got to do a couple things I haven't really done before, like painting an exposed face and power sword. And just a moment here, I'm gonna put them on that shelf that I was talking about, so y'all can see. And here he is next to regular Primaris Captain and a Terminator Sergeant, and this is the shelf where I'll be putting all those minis in the future. And if you liked the video, like, subscribe, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Till then, see you later.